Hey everybody, I am Bishop Megan Rohr of the Sierra Pacific Synod, and today we are having a conversation about mission funding, which might not sound fun or cool or hip, but it's actually talking about how Lutherans care for those who are homeless and hungry, thinking about ways that we respond to disasters, both domestically and globally, and the way that we fund awesome and innovative, diverse pastors. And so I have a special guest today. Special guest, will you introduce yourself?
Hello, my name is Gabe Brannon. I live up in Eastern Washington, so I'm out here on the West Coast with all of you. I'm in Pullman, Washington, so the Northwest Intermountain Synod. I've been with the ELCA now for a little over 5 years, and they officially call me a mission funding director. So thank you so much for having me here. I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Absolutely. Will you begin by defining what mission funding actually is?
So mission funding is the ministries of that are supported outside of what happens when you put money into the plate on Sunday. So this is separate ministries. So ministries like ELCA World Hunger will be the biggest one that we talk about out of mission funding director. So when we expend $22-23 million every year for ELCA World Hunger, that's money that was raised through mission funding. Lutheran Disaster Response Fund for Leaders, our missionaries, YAGM, our overseas work, those kinds of things are all funded through mission funding. So that money doesn't come directly through a church necessarily. It doesn't come through, like I said, that plate that gets passed around is directed directly for these missions. So when you do a good gifts catalog fundraiser, that's part of mission funding. When you support an overseas missionary or a YAGM, that's all part of mission funding. So these are identified missions, identified ministries within the budget of the ELCA.
Well, and it's currently Giving Tuesday, which is just a day when people donate money online. And if people look at the descriptions below, there are links where you can donate to the topics that we're talking about. Because we're talking about funding things with money, you might as well ask people if they want to also share the money. But I was thinking maybe we could talk a little bit about how I think the common misperception that people have is that when we donate money in the offering plate or in a congregation or to the synod, there's this idea that it trickles up like backwards from the way some politicians want it to go. And this idea is like we give a lot to our congregation, then a bit of that goes to the synod and a bit of that goes to churchwide. And that's sort of how it happens. But I see it more as like a circle, because what actually happens is congregations give some money to the synod gives some of the money to churchwide and some of the money back to congregations. And then the money that churchwide has is some of it is given to synods and some of it is given to congregations and some of it goes out into mission. And then obviously there's people who get paid to do things like you and I, where funding comes out from that. But it's this kind of really interesting spiral of money going up and down and in circles. And
it's not necessarily like a flow chart, like it's like a Rorschach test. It's like an ink blot. So you're 100% right, and I think it speaks to really a Lutheran way of doing things, especially when it comes to a fundraising. You know, Bishop Eaton will tell you one of the first things she'll tell you is we're church together. You know, it's not the Churchwide Office is out doing all this all by themselves, and we'll do it without help. And the synod certainly isn't out doing things all by themselves, and they don't need help. It's all of us participating in this mission work together. It's all of us doing it, I think, in a really Lutheran way, and staying true to our Lutheran roots. And you're right. It's the money that goes up comes back down, and when it comes back down, it comes back up, and that allows us to continue to exist and grow and be a part of the world together, even though there are three expressions of the church, like you said, congregations, the synod, and the churchwide. That's the three expressions of the ELCA. Those three expressions aren't silos. You know, it's a Venn diagram, and in the middle of it, you know, where those three circles intersect, I think that's where you're going to find Jesus and find the works that we're doing together.
So my very first call to ministry was to care for the homeless and hungry in San Francisco, and it did that exclusively for about 12 years. And so very close to my heart is caring for the homeless and hungry. throughout those years, got several domestic grants for caring for hunger here in the United States. But in addition to funding like congregations and mission projects and groups that are doing hunger work lifted up within kind of the geographies of synods, there's also funding that goes out globally. And am I correct that the way this process happens, as I understand it, is that groups are invited to kind of dream about how they want to resolve or care for or respond to hunger in their area. Then they come back with proposals, and it's a conversation back and forth so that local people kind of decide the efforts and the projects and the ways that they want to work together. And that's my understanding of how it works. Is that correct?
Yeah. So two words come to mind with me. I'm going to be in Denver, Colorado this coming weekend, and I listened to their sermon from last weekend, and Pastor Caitlin challenged everyone to have a word for Advent. So that really hit me. So I decided my word, even separate from this question, but it leads into that, is listening. Everything we're going to do is start with listening to our global partners, listening with our siblings in Christ here, listening to the synods, listening to our congregations, and really listening to what is needed, where they need our help, where we can plug in and help. So that listening is absolutely the first thing that we're going to do. And that happens with our domestic grants that we gave out. I think last year we gave out around 260 domestic grants. I think we were in 50-ish states and territories. So the first thing we're going to do is listen, because it doesn't make sense for us to come into anywhere and say, this is what you're going to do. This is the best way to do it. This is what we think, because we don't know. We're not the ones on the ground. We really believe the people on the ground in any situation should be people from the ground. I think that separates us from a lot of other organizations that do the kind of work that we do. And then the other word that comes to mind is accompaniment, which is a word we talk a lot about in Global Mission. The model of accompaniment is you walk alongside someone in the model of accompaniment. You don't take a step ahead. You don't take a step behind. There's not a junior partner and a senior partner. You walk together in Christ. You walk together and listen and share in the brokenness and the struggle, or whatever it's going to be, because we're never going to come together like this, right? There's always going to be asymmetries in any sort of relationship. So when you walk in accompaniment, at the end of that, both partners are going to be changed, hopefully for the better. So that's absolutely the first thing that we're going to do. And what is needed in the Sierra Pacific Synod is different at the north end of it as it is at the south end of it. What is needed in the Sierra Pacific Synod isn't the same thing that's going to be needed in Guatemala or in Georgia. So understanding that it's different contexts, and when we lead with listening and you walk in accompaniment with other people, that's how we find success. That's how we know that what we're doing are projects and ministries that are going to work. And again, and in that very sort of Lutheran sort of way of walking together in Christ.
Well, that's really important to me, because in kind of the times we live in, one of the things that we're trying to do is like double check that everything we're kind of doing with our mission work and our support work is done in an anti-racist way, whenever that's possible, and is done in a way that's allowing people to have kind of contribution and support into things. And so I wanted to name that, because for some people, when they hear the word mission, because of the way missions happened when the United States was being colonized, they might think it's believe this thing or you're out. And really the way that we do it is about negotiation and listening and partnering together and about a spirit of cooperation. And so I just think that's for me, it's something that makes me proud about the way ELCA Lutherans are out in the world caring for people.
Yeah, and you bring up a good point, and it's an interesting conversation when you talk about ELC missionaries, overseas missionaries, our young adults at Global Mission, which will be going back into service this coming year. This isn't the old, people will say we still have missionaries, and they ask that question legitimately, and it's different than it was 50 years ago. And the way things were done 50 years ago were great for 50 years ago. It was about spreading the word. It was about getting out and saying, have you heard of Jesus? And spreading that good news and especially the news of grace, right? That's what we were called in the world to do. Well, the world doesn't need that anymore. The world has heard of Jesus. That is true around most of the world. So really, our missionaries now overseas live within communities. They're part of that community. They live alongside with those communities. When those communities hurt, they hurt. When those communities thrive, they thrive. When our missionaries in Jerusalem earlier this year, when bombs were being shot, they were there. They were there among the people, and they were there to help comfort the people and do their work alongside them. So it's no longer about us going out and just trying to spread the word. Our missionaries are faith leaders. Our missionaries are health leaders. Our missionaries are doing education. They're doing whatever is needed in that context, and they live amongst the people in that context. It's a really important distinction of how things used to be and how things are now. It used to be it was God's story, and He gave it to us, and then it was our job to take it to the world. Well, that's not really the way it is. In reality, it's God's story. We all live together in it. So I think that's the way our missionaries try to approach the work.
I like that. If you are someone who is wanting to contribute or support some of this work, you can check out the links in the description and do that. But there's also a really fun way that you can support, particularly kind of world hunger. And it's one of my favorite things that happens on the holiday season. It's really cool puns about Christmas giving. If you have seen Facebook and Instagram and Twitter, there's lots of cute pictures of pigs in Santa Claus hats. And will you tell people about Good Gifts?
Oh, the Good Gifts catalog is wonderful. So it's an accessible, easy way to understand the ministries of the ELCA Churchwide Office, and it's primarily a World Hunger vehicle. Although you will find things in there that have to do with Fund for Leaders or disaster response, or there's different buckets of different things that you'll find in there. But it's primarily hunger, and you'll see you can get goats, or you can get pigs, and you can get water wells. These are all different things, and it doesn't tell you everything about hunger, but I really feel like it is a window into the hunger, right? You get a little bit of a peek of it. So let me talk about goats really quick. So in 2019, I had a chance to travel through Tanzania and Rwanda. It was a life-changing experience. I traveled with about a dozen other Lutheran, ELCA Lutherans from around the country. We had a chance to tour some of the sites. And one of the places we were in was a place called Ketubene in Tanzania. And we were going to bring about $400 worth of powdered milk to people that lived in this community. We're going to go up to this boma. So a boma is a circular homestead where an extended family lives. And in the middle of that circular homestead, there's a pen, and that's where they keep the animals. So as we walked up with this $400 of powdered milk, I was greeted by all of these people and all these goats, herds and herds of goats. And it was the first time on the trip. It happened to me 3 different times. This was the first time that I had kids walk up and pull on my beard, because we don't see a lot of redheads. We don't see a lot of beards while we're there. So they surrounded me, and they surrounded the goats. We spent, I don't know, probably an hour there in conversation, maybe a little bit longer. And I noticed off onto the side that the first kid that walked up and pulled my beard like that had a stick, and he was practicing herding goats, much like we would see kids here, I think, practicing shooting baskets. So a goat for him was, a goat is food, a goat is milk, a goat is cheese, a goat is more goats. But a goat is also a savings account. So when a family needs school supplies, when family needs money for food, you take the goat to the market. So what's really impactful and powerful, I think, about the Good Gifts catalog is when you look at the goat, don't just think about the goat. Think about the family and the kid and the community that these goats are going to be a part of. It's a really powerful way, I think, of looking at it and understanding that a $50 goat can make a huge difference. A $500 cow, $700 for a whole family farm It's more than just a farm. It's chickens, it's eggs, it's a savings account. It's a way to build up a capacity within a community. So every gift, as you look at the good gifts catalog, when you think about school supplies, don't just think about books and pencils and paper. Think about the life that education is going to change of someone out there in the world. So every year, the good gifts catalog, especially this time of year, is absolutely wonderful. On Giving Tuesday, it's absolutely wonderful. I spoke with a woman earlier in the week about the good gifts catalog, and she earmarks a certain amount of money for all of her grandkids, and they get to go through and they pick out how much they want, and then they spend it all together. So it's a good way to address hunger. It's a good way that he talked about for us to be church together, and it's a good way to really start to understand the power of philanthropy and how $50 for a good gift for a goat can make a difference, or how $50 in a soup kitchen can feed 100 people tonight. That's a big deal. Those are all real things that happen as you go through there. So I would encourage you, as you look at those and you think about chicks or you think about goats, remember that those go to people and the impact that they're having on those people's lives. And I think that's the greatest part of that ministry, is that it's really going to go to people and communities of need and really give them, like you said, tangible things. Like when I was in Tanzania, they didn't need cows. They didn't have the vegetation there to support cows. They needed goats. So that's why we listened and we sent them goats. So it's an absolutely wonderful thing to do. You can get cards. We have funny pictures. We have funny videos. I encourage you to go out and look at them all. But it's a wonderful time of year and one of our most successful and biggest ministries of the year, certainly.
Well, and if anyone is interested in getting me presents, our family prefers the little piggies, the little piglets.
The little piggies.
They're so
cute.
Little
piggies are, yeah. You know, when I was in Tanzania. This was pre-COVID, if we can remember that. So it's like the last place I was able to go. I remember seeing everywhere there's motorcycles everywhere in Arusha, just everywhere. And I saw maybe the biggest pig I've ever seen. I think it wasn't breathing anymore. On the back of this motorcycle, and it was tilted. You know, the wheels were way down, and this guy was taking that pig to wherever it was going. So the pigs are great, and they look nice in the pictures.
Yeah, they're really cute. The World Hunger work that happens is really spectacular, I think. And do you have examples of some of the stuff that we do domestically as well?
Yeah, I do. I can think of one. There's a couple projects that come to mind for it. So what's important to understand is internationally, we really take the lead on these projects. We work along with our partners, our ecumenical partners around the world on those projects, but we're doing a lot of the heavy lifting from our end. Domestically, it's the opposite. Our congregation's already taken the lead, and we're filling in as we can support them. So there's several that come to mind. One that I was just reading about earlier today is a project that has received ELCA funding in the past. I'm not sure if it's currently receiving funding, but they started an urban garden in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, in a strong Black and Latinx neighborhood. So what they saw there, especially coming through COVID, was you cannot find nutritious food really anywhere. The local grocery stores don't have it. You're going to have to travel maybe a couple miles in order to get it, if you can afford to do that. So the food that they were able to get was not necessarily good food. So where do they invest that money from ELCA World Hunger? They started an urban garden. It started with, I think, 90 raised beds or 9 raised beds and a couple trees. It's like Luther said, if I knew the world was going to end today, if I knew the world was going to end tomorrow, I'd plant an apple tree today. That's what they did. They planted trees, they planted gardens, and they give out food to the community 3 days a week in an urban setting, because that's what that community needs. They need fresh fruit. They need fresh vegetables. That's the kind of work that's being done. Another example is a congregation that bought a food truck to give out calzones. Well, why are calzones so great? Well, they're portable, they're hot. You can take them with you. You can feed a family with a calzone. So they come out as a part of reaching out into the community, being, a part of the community, inviting the community to join them. That's what they do. So we do all kinds of different, community outreach like that. I think 97% of our congregations in the ELCA have some sort of food ministry attached. And that just may be you have, a small soup kitchen. That's great if that's what your community needs. So ELCA World Hunger supports programs of all sizes around the country, and really we listen. It wouldn't make sense for a congregation to say, hey, we need an oven, and we said, well, here's some apple seeds. It's not the way it's going to work. So those are the kinds of work that we do here domestically. Those are two examples that come to mind sort of off the top of my head.
Well, I think of the work that I've done in the past. I think I received domestic hunger grants for making peanut butter and jelly sandwiches and taking youth groups on mission tours to hand out sandwiches to the homeless. Peanut butter and jelly because people can put it in their backpack and the next day they don't get sick because they didn't refrigerate it. And doing kind of poverty education with young people. We had a large kind of community garden that we helped several different Lutheran congregations do. And then I think we also got funding for the lunch after a homeless choir's practice so that they could have community and joy and spirit with each other. And I've always appreciated the way in which there's been a diversity of types of things that are funded so that if whatever the creative thing for that local area is.
We have several congregations that do backpacks. We're going to pack backpacks full of food and send them home with kids on the weekend because, they get school lunches when they're here on Monday through Friday, but we don't know what happens to them at 3:00 on Friday till 8:30 on Monday morning. So those congregations and those communities saw that, and the opportunity there is backpacks full of food. That works great there, and it's those kinds of projects. And again, it comes from listening. It's like you said before, it's a process. So one of the questions that comes up, especially with international work, is, well, what happens when a well breaks? Or do we go fix the well? And the answer is no, it's not our well. That we wouldn't have put a well into a community unless that community was really serious about wanting a well. Right? We don't build wells and leave. We build wells and then build communities around them. And that's a big distinction. So when you're trained, you understand how the importance of a well, you're going to fix the well, you're going to take care of your well. And the same thing that happens here, it starts with listening to the projects that are needed, and then working alongside our ecumenical partners to make sure that they're successful.
We have a very long question. Are you ready for it?
Yes.
Thank you for the work that you are doing, Gabe. I appreciate the projects you are doing. I have a few questions. Can you tell us what you are doing to foster meaningful, long-lasting relationships that aren't just white savior complexes? What are they doing to ensure those relationships are even desired and mutual? Are there any BIPOC and or international folk leading these projects? And how many folks would you say are from communities being served are in leadership?
That's a thick and a juicy question. So I'll do my best to answer it. By saying, like I said before, it's important for us that the people on the ground are the people from the ground. So when we do work in, I was just in Tanzania and Rwanda. When we do work in those countries, we do so when we're called to partner along with them, right? We no longer send missionaries places. Our missionaries are called to places where we can be of service. And it goes both ways. I know a few years ago, I believe it was in New Jersey, we had a large Portuguese speaking community, and we were not prepared at all for a large Portuguese speaking community within the ELCA. So we reached out to our partners in Brazil and said, hey, we need your help. Can you come here and help us with that? So the people on the ground, or the people from the ground, the people who are heading up these projects, the people who are making decisions, the people who are executing, the people who are impacted, are all going to be people who are directly involved with those projects. I'm trying to go through the question as best I can while here we go. How many folks would you say African communities are being served, are in leadership? I'm not sure exactly what we mean by leadership there. If it's leadership at the church, if it's leadership when we work with leadership of the Lutheran Church of Tanzania, everyone there is going to be, from Tanzania. So it's that accompaniment model where we're not really taking the lead on those projects. We're walking alongside with. So I think we're really cognizant of trying to do that anywhere we go, where we understand that it's no longer senior partner, junior partner on these projects. That's the old way of doing it. It's not successful. And it doesn't build long-term. It doesn't build community. It doesn't build community, because you'll see other organizations, and I'm not going to name any particular, but some organizations will come in, like I said, they'll build wells and then they'll move on to the next well. And then that's not all not well and good in those situations. That's not the way we want to operate. So I think it's important for us that we're the leaders and someone else is following. It's really that accompaniment model as we move forward through these projects.
Well, I wonder if a good example that also gets us to one of the other topics I wanted to talk about, Lutheran disaster response, would be to talk about one of our newest communities that's in development here in our synod. So in the Sacramento area, the Sierra Pacific Synod wanted to do outreach to Arabic and Middle Eastern Christians and folk who are from Afghanistan. Mm-hmm. And so we, in partnership with Churchwide, said, how can we do this? Over 12 years of conversation happened. And so we identified a leader, and the we means all of us, right? Because we're all the we. Mm-hmm. And we identified a leader who is now in seminary and working on all of the certifications you need to transition from living in Lebanon to living in the United States and doing ministry. And a portion of that funding comes from the Synod, a portion of the funding comes from California Lutheran University and Pacific Theological Seminary. And then another portion of that funding comes from Lutheran disaster response. Mm-hmm. And the way that funding happened is that the organization of Arab-speaking and Middle Eastern Lutherans were asked, what kind of project would you like to do to respond to some of the disasters that we know about that are happening now or we expect to happen in the next 3 years? Because we want to support your efforts over the next 3 years. And so they wrote the plan, they mm-hmm. consulted with people in Lutheran disaster response and the World Hunger Office to make sure the plan was shaped in the way that it needed to be shaped in order to kind of move to the next step of development. And then what ended up happening is that a portion of funding was provided for this brand new growing community to provide food support, mm-hmm. to provide care for people who are experiencing domestic violence, and to care for people who are resettling from Afghanistan, right? Yeah. And so that's 3 years worth of funding so that they can develop that project over a period of time, and particularly over the time when, for some people who are resettling, when they're immigrants or refugees, funding stops after a certain time date that you're in the United States. And so this was an intentional way to have funding that gets people beyond those points. Yeah. Other services can't be helpful. And so the development of that project for me kind of speaks to that model of here's enough funding to go try this and see if mm-hmm. it is, to see if your plans meet the community's needs. And then each year, let us know how it's going, and let's work with it to see where the dream is and where the reality of needs are, and let's kind of go back and forth. But enough commitment to funding that it's something people can truly invest their time and their energies in without feeling like it's just going to end in a couple of weeks or when the funding stops. And so I appreciated the way that development process happens. And I think that's similar to some of the ways that these plans happen.
Yeah. Again, it starts with listening. It starts with that, with my word for Advent is that listening to really what's needed. And you bring up, I think, a couple interesting things when it comes to disaster response, at least that I think people will find, maybe that they don't understand is, who do we work with? When I say our partners, who are they? So our partners globally are ecumenical partners. So they're going to be Lutheran World Federation, Lutheran World Relief, the ACT Alliance, locally it'll be local, the Lutheran Social Services. So another good example of, and this I think speaks a little bit to what you just talked about when people think of disasters. Well, what is our response to disasters? So a disaster is a traumatic event in someone's life. And I think people think, well, when we have disaster response, we bring them food, we bring them blankets, we bring them shelter, and then that's what they need. That's what they need. But that's not always what you need. A few years back, when there was flooding in the Midwest, a lot of that money the disaster response money went for the mental health of the farmers. Because what happens to a farmer when he's not farming anymore? In your own synod, going back to 2018 with the car fire and the campfire, we're still working with folks around that, around mental health. So in Shasta County, I know there is a mind-body medical center, I can't remember the exact name, where they're just helping people get through the trauma of losing everything in a fire. That's a disaster, right? Disaster response moves beyond making sure someone has a sandwich. And so we can do that so we can move on to the next disaster. It's remaining in those communities and making sure that they're taken care of. So it's like you said, the project that you described, that's a 3-year project. We understand disasters are, they have a major impact on communities, and major impacts are something that gets, settled and shuffled over the course of 6 weeks or until the next disaster comes along.
And my understanding about the way Lutheran disaster response cares for folk within disasters, both in the United States and kind of all over the world, is in kind of 3 different phases, right? The preparatory work, like that emergency planning stuff that we do, not just emergency planning, like having an earthquake kit, like many of us here in California do, but also the emotional and spiritual emergency planning. So our synod participated in the emotional care trainings that are provided by Lutheran Disaster Response. So to get our own resilience and our own heart in order, so that when we're needed to love our neighbors, we're better equipped to be able to do that in a disaster. Then there's the immediate needs in a disaster, and sometimes that looks like things like gift cards during the time period before you're going to be able to get insurance funding or support from other spaces, or contacting congregations and asking them, what do you need right now and how can we get it to you as quickly as possible? And then putting out an alert. So if you're not on the Lutheran Disaster Response alert to kind of know when there's needs happening, you can sign up for those. And then there's the longer term kind of cleanup and care that might take years afterwards to rebuild in a community or to help people start again in all of that kind of longer term healing stuff. But you also have people who get dispatched and go out to bigger emergencies. Is that correct?
I'd call that chainsaw ministry. I call it chainsaw ministry because people show up with chainsaws because there's trees that got to get cut down. We got to get this place cleaned up. We gotta start getting this community, back to where we need to be. And sometimes that takes chainsaws. So very, very, in a very real way, we fund people with chainsaws who come out and, cut down trees and get that debris cleared away. You talk about, getting people gift cards. Sometimes we'll partner with Other organizations, some organizations are going to be able to provide maybe a bed for someone, but we're going to give you a gift card so you can go get a pillow and a blanket so you can have, a little bit of warmth with it. So it's a real practical kind of stuff that we're going to do. And like you said, we're there for a while. We understand that this is gonna take a while to rebuild a community. And you've seen that. We were talking a little bit before we went live, and how much disaster response impacts your synod. I think out here in the West, we understand wildfires in a way maybe they don't understand around the rest of the country, because there wasn't a synod out here in Region 1 or 2, which is sort of the western part of the United States, that wasn't under smoke. We were under smoke up here for probably 6 weeks. And, it used to be 3 and now it's 6. And I think we understand now that wildfire disaster response is real and is needed, because we see it in front of us every day. And to make a plug for ELCA disaster response, since it's Giving Tuesday, I'll say that when you give to a particular disaster, so we have a couple of different ways to do it. You can give to Lutheran disaster response as a whole, and that's great because that lets us to respond to disasters around the world that aren't maybe necessarily front page kind of news. But when you give, so there's a little bit of overhead. I think our overhead cost, it was about 11% last year for disaster response, which is pretty good, We'll benchmark that against everybody. But when you give to wildfires, or when you give to India, or when you gave to Haiti, or what's happening in Ethiopia right now, 100 pennies of that dollar is going to go to that ministry. So again, this is a real Lutheran way of doing it. We really believe that. So if your heart says, I need to help with this wildfire, understand that 64 cents of that isn't going to go somewhere else, or that not even 13 cents of it's going to go over here to help with this disaster. All that money is going to go to that disaster that you've picked out for those named disasters. And that really, I think, is important to understand when you're out here in the West. And the wildfires hit again next year, and you're wondering where you can go to help. I think a Lutheran disaster response is as good a bang for your buck as you're going to get.
Yeah, and my experience is that it was pretty fast. That folk were reaching out, and honestly, there was a time since I've only been the bishop since July 1st, but I couldn't even tell you how many wildfires we have had, because there were so many at the same time. It felt impossible to even learn all the names of every single one, because as soon as one was out, another one was starting. And so I think we're kind of perhaps living into a time when disasters are something we'll experience regularly if global warming keeps heading the direction that it is, and with the severity of storms and the severity of even kind of man-made disasters like gun violence and things like that, the ways that we're going to have to be equipped to continually respond to our neighbors and care for others, I think, is just a part of our regular way of being in the world. And as what I've really appreciated about the Lutheran response to disasters is that there are a number of groups that might respond to disasters, but we're one of the only groups that doesn't have a checklist of the kind of human being you have to be in order to get support, right? So we're not checking how rich or how poor someone is. We're not checking their skin color. We're not checking what their family makeup is like, or if they're following certain religious beliefs or which creeds are their favorites. And we're, I think, one of very few faith-based spaces that's able to give out funding, believing that all people are equally saints and sinners. And so we don't kind of triage money towards people who believe the same as us, but to just all people. And so it's a thing I appreciate.
Yeah. It's that darn grace that we get stuck with as Lutherans, right? I think we're going to talk a little bit about Fund for Leaders in a second, but when you talk about chaplaincy, so one of the things that we support with Fund for Leaders, and I'll just launch into it since we're at this point in the conversation, is we have scholarship opportunities for chaplains. And I know one of the things that we pride ourselves in is with our chaplaincy program is, and if you talk to our chaplains, they'll tell you that our Lutheran chaplains are really one of the few, if not the only, chaplains and people in that position that lead with grace. It's like you said, we don't have a checklist. We don't need to know if you're tithing. We don't need to know if you're Lutheran. It's the same with disaster response. We don't check all those things when we come into a community. That is not the Lutheran responsibility falls on us, not on you in those situations. So when you lead with grace, it makes it so we are able to work with a lot of people and make a large impact in disaster response, in hunger, in Fund for Leaders, with our YAGM program, all these different programs. When you lead with grace and you understand that the job of being Lutheran is ours, not necessarily yours. When I say yours, is the communities that we're working in. That allows us to really, I think it's freeing. I think it allows us to do the work the way that we want to do it, alongside folks, and find success.
Yeah, that was exactly the conversation that I was having with the chaplain serving at the Air Force Base in Travis. And because there is a way in which, if people come just looking for one specific ideology in their chaplaincy, we forget that people serving in military are youth and young adults. And not only because the ELCA definition is everyone under the age of 30, but because those enlisting in service often are a similar age of those in campus ministry. And so being able to support and fund people who are doing chaplaincy in the military is equivalent to the same way that we would provide chaplaincy for folk in a campus ministry setting. It's neurologically the time frame when they're making decisions about their faith and their life. And as I think of it, people making some of the most difficult moral decisions on the day-to-day level for sure need people to think about the spiritual and ethical ramifications of what's happening. Would you also be willing to talk about the way that Fund for Leaders helps all of us kind of in the Lutheran Church try to lift up diverse leaders racially and who are going to serve communities that are diverse? Because I think it's a really great tool for us to encourage more types of people to be a part of seminary and to get trained.
Yeah. Well, so a couple things come to mind for that. One is, you're absolutely right. That's part of our process, is that we want to have a more diverse population coming through our seminaries, right? So that is something that we consider, I believe, as we go through and look at scholarships. We want to be able to reduce the friction for people who are called to seminary, people who are called to lead amongst this church, right? And we want to remove obstacles. We want to reduce educational debt. We want to make that possible. We want to make mission that mission possible for everybody. So that's a big chunk of what we do, is looking to grow that diverse sort of population. We're getting ready to launch this year. So this coming year will be ELCA Fund for Leaders 25th anniversary. And as a part of that, we're getting ready to, that's a big deal. Talking to people who were sort of around when this ministry started, they were laughed at. You'll never be able to do that. You're competing with the seminaries. It will never happen. In that 25 years, that endowment is now at almost $80 million. We're giving out $3 million a year worth of scholarships. We've given out more than 1,000 Fund for Leader scholarships in the course of that program. And we're getting ready to launch our team. Hopefully we're getting the process of a team track for ELCA Fund for Leaders. So team, I can't remember off the top of my head what it stands for, but it's exactly the kind of candidate that you're talking about. Candidates that necessarily aren't from here. Candidates whose education route isn't exactly going to be a straight line from high school to undergraduate to seminary to first call. We're not all lucky enough to live on that line. And we want people who don't live on that line. We want people with diverse voices from diverse places to come here. We're going to be able to help them. So we're looking at launching a team track, because now we're getting to the size of that endowment, the size of that program, where the dream has always been, we're going to fully fund every seminary student going through an ELCA seminary. That's always been the dream. And we're not there yet, but $80 million gets us pretty close. And as we grow that fund, we grow the kind of student that we're able to support through that fund. So I think it's important.
Well, and the Folk in the Theological Education for Emerging Ministries program.
There you go. There's so many acronyms. I still don't have them all. 5 years in, I still can't get them all down.
Yeah, well, it's a special way that when there is a special mission need in a synod or a geographical area, that a bishop can lift up leaders who can address that need. So it could be someone who is of a diverse background, and maybe we are living in a time where there were educational obstacles that make it harder for that person to kind of go through a different route. Maybe it's because the people have other careers, which would be really lovely when paired with some of the work that congregations are in need of. And sometimes it's because the need is so great in a particular area, either because the demographics of a neighborhood have shifted, or because we just because there's need, want someone to be able to do their seminary training more like an apprenticeship than in the traditional track where you go to school for a set amount of time, then you start serving the church. The church says, start serving right now, we need you, and we'll support you and give you mentors and hopefully pretty soon and very soon fund it, right? And so that's a really wonderful way to head forward. I wanted to give you some feedback, Gabe, that you have some fans.
Pastor Matt in Palo Alto. I'm looking forward. I'm going to come visit with them. I think in February I'm going to come down and visit with Pastor Matt and my friends there at Grace in Palo Alto. I always like stopping by there.
Yeah. Well, have you been there since they got their new espresso machine and for the next?
He must be holding out for me on that. I'll have to see if he can whip me up a latte.
Yeah, the coffee machine is awesome. Perry, one of the champions of our Synod Resource Center, has a question for you. And I think the question is about pets, but I don't know you well enough, Perry, to know if you're also talking about extraterrestrial life. But I'm guessing it's about pets. Have we a way to help families care for non-human members of their family?
Not that I know of, not in the work that I do, other than I would say when you buy those pigs and goats, you're helping families definitely with some animals. And I can promise you, having seen those goats and those pigs, they are definitely well taken care of and a part of the communities that they exist in. I was amazed at seeing, kids 8, 9, 10 years old with a herd of 15 goats. Like, that's their responsibility, and they know them all and know them all by name. So.
Well, and I'm guessing with some of those Lutheran disaster response funds, like when there are things like gift cards, that feeding your pets might, and having pet care are the kinds of things that if you were struggling with funding around the edges and there were free groceries over there and there was free whatever over there, that a gift card is the kind of thing that could provide support for all of the additional stuff that I think that so. Less available. Yeah,
absolutely. And go ahead. I would say we have a question about the YAGM program.
Yeah.
So I was gonna quickly lift up our YAGM program. I love our YAGM. This is an acronym that I know. It's our Young Adults and Global Mission Program. So young adults from 21 to 29 years old have an opportunity and a chance to spend a year in service. So we have 11 different countries around the world, Rwanda, Cambodia, a lot of them, particularly in the global south. I don't have the list in front of me, but they spend a year there in service. And again, like our other missionaries, are embedded in communities. I visited with a young man from Minnesota who grew up in Minneapolis, sort of a city boy, and ended up working on a dairy farm. That's what they needed him to do. So they have a host family. And these are all countries that have called for us to send our YAGMs there. They want our young adults there to be a part of their community. So they spend a year being globally formed, globally informed. And I've seen them when they go out, and I've seen them when they come back. And I've always said that when they come back, their hair is on fire. You can see the Holy Spirit pouring off of them. so it's an opportunity for them to spend that year in service. When they come back, about a third of them will go to seminary, and the rest of them really finds jobs in social ministry, social justice kinds of opportunities. So it's it's not exactly like every other program. It's not overseas service like you'll see everywhere else, because it's really rooted in our Lutheran faith. It's really relies upon those communities. I was in Rwanda for their Jubilee celebration, and there was a Rwandan youth choir got up, and our Yagam was right in the middle, singing along, just as if he had been born there. So it's an incredible program. We had to bring our Yagams home in 2020, early, obviously because of COVID. We didn't send any Yagams last year, again, because of COVID. We weren't ready to send. Other countries weren't ready to receive, because it goes both ways. But we're getting ready to relaunch that program with a new cohort of Yagams going out. So it's a great program. It's like I said, these kids have come back, and they are, when you're looking at future leaders, either at the pulpit or our lay leaders within the communities as well, a lot of them are going to go through our Yagam program.
And I have had at least one person contact me to be a reference on their application. Are those application processes open right now?
I think so. If you it's probably elc.org.yagam would be my guess. If you went to that, we're pretty good on those URLs. You'll get all the information there, and there's videos and stories. So if you're a parent wondering what it's about, definitely watch those. But the opportunity to live out your Lutheran calling for a year at such a young age is really a gift. I think it's a gift to send them because of what the people that we get back, and I know that the countries that we send them to definitely appreciate and use them very well. They're just like any of our other missionaries. They're just out for 1 year instead of maybe 20, but it's a great program for sure.
Well, I'm curious if there are particular things that you would lift up for people to fund, since it's Giving Tuesday. We might as well do the pitch. Do you have the pitch? I don't know if you want to pick a thing or
I can pick some things.
Yeah, pick some things.
Off the top of my head, a goat is $50. And I could promise you I've seen goats in action. Like I said, goats could be food, goats can be meat, goats could be other goats could be a savings account, goats could be an enterprise. Goats change lives. School supplies. You can get school supplies for a student for $300. I had a chance in Tanzania to go through the Maasai Lutheran Girls School, and it's a long story. We don't have a lot of time. But at the end of walking around with this girl who was in school there, I asked, what do you want me to come back and tell people? And she said, tell them this place gave me the courage to study. And that really hit me, and it hasn't left me since, because I wasn't the best student. I certainly never needed courage to study. It was never an act of defiance or rebellion to stand up and say, I'm going to get my education. But a lot of these places, those are. So think about those students as you look through the Good Gifts catalog. And then for my third one, I'm going to go to the top. I'm going to go to, I think it's probably the most expensive gift in the Good Gifts catalog, and that's a water well. $2,500 will get you a water well. I will tell you that in the Central African Republic, every 1 in 4, every 1 in 5 children in that country will die before the age of 5. And that's primarily from waterborne diseases and malaria. Those are preventable things. A water well for $2,500 will serve 500 families in the community. And it'll serve 500 families in the community every day. It gives them clean drinking water. There's going to be 2 billion people in the world who drink water that has feces in it today. 2 billion people. That's 6 Americas. We're going to have 800 million people die this year from illnesses coming from drinking contaminated water. So the impact of $2,500 will have on that community is immeasurable, really. So, if it's $50, if it's $300, if it's if it's $500, if it's $10 for chicks, any of those are going to make a huge impact. I just always encourage and want people to realize that it's not the chicks that's important. It's not the water well that's important. It's the communities that they serve. Giving Tuesday is a great day to do it. You should be fully confident that the work that we do, the people that we do that work with, and how we do that work is all going to be very rooted in our Lutheran, in that story of grace. In that model of accompaniment. That's really what we're going to strive to do. So I would point to the Good Gifts catalog and just start flipping through. And then as you look at the pictures, just allow yourself to imagine for the second the person who's going to be alongside that gift, and the person that gift, or the person that gift is going to. I think it's important.
Well, and even better, we have countless stories in our gospel readings of Jesus being the person who wants to hang out outside next to the water well and to have conversations with the people who gather there. And so, all right, Sierra Pacific Synod and those beyond, let's let the fundraising for our water well begin. You can donate with the description below. You can, if you want to donate through Facebook, on my Facebook page, just a little bit below is where you can give through Facebook. And I believe on today, if it's November 30th, or any other day, that Facebook pays the credit card fees, which is usually 3 to 5%. And so it's a good day to give if you want to have those fees taken away. But you can always just mail a check to our office. I bet you could mail a check to the ELCA and write the word well on it, and it'd get to the right place, even if you didn't remember any of the fancy acronyms about
That's
where
right.
it's supposed to go, right?
Yes.
Well, I don't know how often you get thanked. I hope it's all the time. But thank you for doing this work on our behalf and for helping to encourage folk to give generously and to share some of the stories back from the places around the world where you're able to kind of be our feet. If we're Jesus's feet, I think when you go out there to different countries, you get to be our feet and our orange beard in spaces.
That's right. So I had three times I had kids come up and pull my beard, but it's always been, I had an experience early on in my career at the ELCA where someone handed me a gift and said, "I don't think kids should go hungry." And that has stuck with me since that day. And I've always thought, if that's what I'm doing with my day, if something that I did today made sure a kid didn't go hungry, then that's a pretty good day. So it's an honor. So thank you for having me. I always enjoy conversations about all these different kinds of works, and congratulations to all the great ministry work that's happening every time I'm down there in the Sierra Pacific Synod. I'm blown away by the ministry work that all of our churches are already doing within their communities. It's absolutely wonderful. I think Good Gifts gives us a chance to maybe step a little bit outside of our communities, out into the greater world, and live out our Lutheran calling that way.
Yeah. Well, and I think I might have told you this privately when we were meeting, but I'll say it publicly now for the Synod that my hope is, as I visit some of our sister synods, particularly Rwanda and El Salvador, that I can visit some of the spaces where we're able to provide support kind of through our World Hunger gifts or through our disaster response gifts, and be able to bring back some of the stories so that folk can kind of see the impact that they're making, but that so we can keep talking about these things so that we're continuing to kind of share our funds in all the circles and up and down ways that we share our funds. And so that's my hope, is to be a partner or to help amplify some of this work that's happening. But thank you again.
And if anyone has questions for me about anything I've said, they can contact me. But that's my name. It's Gabe Brannon. If you put a period in between it and type elca.org at the end, it'll get to me. So feel free to send questions, comments, however you want to do. I always enjoy to have conversations. I'm obviously not afraid to talk, so I do okay.
And you travel to congregations sometimes too.
I do. Like I said, I'll be in Denver this coming weekend. I just made plans to be in Palo Alto That's me right there. Palo Alto on the first weekend of December or February. So I'll be out there to talk to them about some of the great works of the ELCA. So I'm open to do that as well. So if you want to chat, visit, meet in person, I'm always up for any of those things.
Sounds great. Well, thank you again for your time, and thank you everyone who watched our live stream today, or whatever day you end up watching it.
That's right. Well, thank you so much, and thanks for having me. It was nice to see you.
Absolutely. Take care, everybody.
All right.